There's a particular kind of quiet that isn't empty. You've probably felt it, the silence that comes from someone who's standing right in front of you but hasn't fully arrived yet. Not because they don't want to. Not because they don't feel something. But because feeling something deeply and knowing how to survive that feeling are two entirely different things. And somewhere in your story, you've been on the receiving end of that silence, and it has cost you something. Maybe it cost you certainty. Maybe it cost you sleep. Maybe it cost you the version of yourself that trusted easily. That's the energy sitting here today. Heavy with history. Tender in places that have been waiting to soften for a long time. So let's sit with it. Let's not rush it. The first thing I'm sensing, before anything else, is a love that existed in full before it was ever spoken. That's important. That's the foundation of what's being shown here. This wasn't indifference disguised as silence. This was love that lived somewhere very deep inside someone, so deep it almost frightened them. Because when something matters that much, the stakes feel unbearable. And unbearable stakes have a way of keeping people very, very quiet. Some of you are going to recognize this energy immediately. You've been in the presence of someone whose feelings you could almost sense through the air, but whose words never confirmed what you were picking up. And that gap, the space between what you felt and what was said, became a place of doubt for you. You started questioning your own perception. Am I imagining this? Did I misread everything? You weren't imagining it. The energy here is clear about that. The love was real. The silence was never about the love. What I'm reading in this person's energy is a fear so layered it took years to build. This isn't the kind of fear that has an obvious origin story. It's not a single wound. It's more like a long series of moments where being visible, emotionally visible, truly seen, led to something painful. Maybe they were misunderstood. Maybe they were too much for someone. Maybe the one time they let their guard fully down, it was used against them, or it simply wasn't received the way they had hoped. And after something like that, you learn to protect. The protection becomes a kind of armor. But armor doesn't know when the war is over. So they carried it into this. Into whatever this situation is for you, a relationship, a connection, something that never quite got to be what it should have been, and they brought all of that old learned caution with them. Not because of you. That's what I need you to hear. Their emotional walls were constructed long before you came along. You didn't build them. You've just been standing on the outside of them, wondering what you did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. There's something here that feels like a heart that's been kept in a very safe, very locked place. And I mean that in the most human way possible. Not manipulative. Not intentionally withholding. Just genuinely, deeply private in a way that even they may not have fully understood about themselves. Some people don't know how guarded they are until someone comes along who actually makes them want to open. And the wanting to open is almost more destabilizing than staying closed. Because wanting to open means there's something to lose. I'm getting an image of someone sitting with their own feelings for a very long time. Turning them over in private. Letting them grow in silence. Maybe even rehearsing things they wanted to say and then talking themselves out of it before a single word left their mouth. Does that feel familiar for some of you? This person who might have looked unbothered, who maybe even seemed distant or disengaged, behind all of that, there was a very active inner world. And you were in it. You were in their thoughts far more than they ever let on. This is interesting, because what I'm seeing is a very specific kind of self-protection that can look like disinterest from the outside. The emotional walls here aren't cold, they're anxious. There's a difference. Cold detachment comes from not caring. What this person had going on was the opposite. They cared so much that the caring itself felt dangerous. so they built a version of themselves that could be around you without fully arriving. A managed version. A version that kept just enough distance to feel safe. But you can't be half present around someone forever. Eventually something happens. The armor gets heavy. Or the situation shifts. Or they come to a point where continuing to hide starts costing more than revealing would. And that's the energetic shift I'm sensing here. Something has changed in them. Something has reached a threshold. The mask, as it were, is beginning to come down. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because it's not dramatic. It's not a sudden tearful confession or a grand gesture. The dropping of pretense that's coming through looks quieter than that. More honest. More frightened, actually, in its own way. Because taking off a mask you've worn for years, even one you built out of self-defense, leaves you feeling very exposed. And exposure is exactly what this person has been avoiding. The energy here feels like someone standing at a threshold they've been circling for a long time. They've looked at this door before. They've come close to opening it and then walked away. But something about now feels different. There's a readiness that wasn't here before. A kind of spiritual exhaustion with the effort of keeping everything locked away. Some of you are going to feel this shift before it's spoken. You'll notice something different in the way they look at you, or the way they respond, or even the silences between you will start to feel like they're carrying something new. Pay attention to those small things. What's coming through now is a wave of emotional exposure that I can only describe as both terrifying and necessary for this person. This is someone who is learning, perhaps for the first time in a very serious way, that being seen doesn't have to mean being destroyed. That vulnerability isn't the same as weakness, even though they've spent so long treating it that way. I keep picking up a feeling like releasing a breath that's been held for too long. That's what this moment represents energetically. The exhale after a very long inhale. And here's what I think some of you have been underestimating, the courage this is taking for them. You've been waiting. You've been uncertain, maybe even hurt. And that is completely valid. But on the other side of this equation is someone who is facing one of the deepest fears they carry, which is the fear of letting someone into the parts of themselves they've never trusted anyone to see. That is not a small thing for this person. It's enormous. The energy keeps bringing me back to one particular theme, and I don't want to skip over it. There's something here about love that was given in ways that were never recognized as love. This person, the one whose energy is coming through, may have shown their feelings in actions rather than words. In showing up, or remembering details, or being quietly consistent in ways they hoped would communicate what they couldn't say. And maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe it didn't translate. Maybe you needed words and they gave you presence, and the gap between those two things created distance. Neither of you was wrong. You just spoke different emotional languages. But I think what's changing is that they're beginning to understand that the translation matters. That what lives inside them needs to actually travel to another person to mean anything. Love that stays entirely interior, no matter how genuine, no matter how consuming, it can't build something. And they're starting to understand that at a very deep level. Take what resonates here and leave what doesn't. This is a collective reading, and the specifics will look different for each of you. But across the board, I'm seeing a pattern of emotion that was never absent and never cold. It was present and terrified. And now it's preparing to speak. I'm hearing something, and I want to be clear this is coming through intuitively, so sit with it and see if it lands for you. It almost feels like someone wants to say, I didn't know how to hold this and show it at the same time. Like the feeling was so large that handling it took everything they had, and expressing it simultaneously felt impossible. Not an excuse. Just a truth. The kind of truth that's easier to understand in hindsight than in the middle of it. Does that resonate for some of you? That sense that this person wasn't choosing silence over you, but rather struggling under the weight of something they didn't know how to carry gracefully? What feels significant now is that something is ready to be said. Something real. Not a performance, not a carefully managed version of the truth, the actual truth. What this person has been protecting in that locked part of themselves is getting ready to surface. And it's coming through as a kind of sacred release, honestly. Because when someone who has spent years guarding their inner world finally speaks it aloud, it isn't casual. It's not easy for them. Every word is going to come from somewhere genuine. This is going to feel different from conversations you've had with them before. There will be a quality to it that you'll recognize as more honest, more unguarded. And I want to prepare you for the possibility that it might be imperfect. Real vulnerability often is. It might come out fragmented or emotional or at an unexpected time. Try not to need it to arrive perfectly. What matters is that it's arriving at all. The energy shifts here in a way I wasn't fully expecting. Because underneath all of this, underneath the walls and the fear and the silence, what's being revealed is something quite tender. A depth of feeling that has been remarkably consistent. This didn't waver. Even during the periods when this person pulled away or seemed to go somewhere internal and unreachable, the feeling didn't disappear. It just went somewhere they thought was safer. And that tells me something about the nature of what's here. This isn't a passing thing. This isn't something they stumbled into. This is a feeling that has survived their own fear of it, and that kind of staying power means something. Some of you may be realizing as you listen to this that you've known on some level. That somewhere in your intuition you understood this person wasn't indifferent, even when everything on the surface suggested otherwise. And yet you've spent time, real time, meaningful time, doubting yourself. Wondering if you were projecting. Wondering if hope was making you see things that weren't there. I want you to trust what you felt. Not in a blind way, not in a way that ignores your own experience and pain. But in the way that acknowledges, your intuition was picking up something real. You're not imagining this energy. At first this felt like a story about silence. But sitting with it longer, it feels more like a story about transformation. About someone who is genuinely changing, not because they've been asked to, not because they're trying to meet an expectation, but because something inside them has shifted in a way that makes staying the same impossible. Growth that comes from that place is the kind that actually lasts. There's something in here that feels like a decision has been made. Maybe not announced yet. Maybe still forming. But internally, something has been decided. A resolution to stop hiding. A recognition that what they've been keeping private deserves to exist in the open, at least with this one person. And here's what I want to say to you, the person receiving this energy, you don't have to make yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's journey into openness. Your needs during the waiting period were valid. The confusion you felt was valid. Whatever hurt accumulated in the silence was real, and you're allowed to still be sitting with that even as things begin to change. Healing isn't linear, and neither is allowing someone back into your field when they've operated from a place of distance. It's okay to feel simultaneous things, hope and hesitation, warmth and guardedness. You don't have to have it perfectly resolved in yourself before anything can move forward. What I keep coming back to in this energy is a moment of confession, and I use that word not in a heavy or dramatic way, but in its truest sense. A laying down of secrets. A choosing to stop managing the information and start offering something honest. What this person has inside them that's about to be shared has been there for a long time. It isn't new. It's just finally ready to breathe. This feels like a conversation that might come quietly. Maybe late, when defenses are lower. Maybe in a moment of unexpected honesty where the usual self-monitoring slips and something true comes through before they can catch it. However it arrives, there's a genuineness to it that the energy is very clear about. I want to say something that might be useful for some of you to hear, especially those who have felt frustrated or even angry at the silence. That anger made complete sense. When someone's fear looks like unavailability, when protection looks like indifference, it's natural to feel dismissed. And I don't think you need to let go of that experience or pretend it didn't happen just because you now understand the reason behind it. Understanding a thing and being unaffected by it are not the same. But what I'm sensing is an opportunity here. Not to go back to what was before, because what was before clearly carried too much that wasn't working, but to step into something more honest than what either of you has inhabited in this connection so far. That requires something from both sides. It requires you to remain open even when self-protection is calling. It requires them to keep choosing courage even when fear is louder. The energy repeating itself here, and I keep coming back to this because it feels important, is this sense of love that simply never left. It adapted. It went underground. It wore different clothing at different times. But it didn't stop. And there's something quietly extraordinary about a feeling that has persisted through someone's own fear of it. Not everyone experiences that. Not everyone has something that lives in them that stubbornly. Whatever this is between you two carries a weight that speaks to its significance, not just romantically, but spiritually, as a connection that seems to be completing something. For those of you this doesn't fully land for, perhaps the connection you're thinking of has run its course. Perhaps the person whose energy you hope to find here turned out not to be who this is about. That's okay, too. Maybe what's being reflected back to you today is something about your own heart. The silence you've kept about your own feelings. The parts of yourself that you've been protecting so thoroughly that even people who love you can't quite reach them. Sometimes these readings aren't about the other person at all. Coming toward the end of what this energy is showing me, and what I'm left with is a sense of arrival. Not completion exactly, more like something that was circling has finally landed. Something that has been waiting in the wings of this person's inner world is stepping forward. And the step, while imperfect, is real. The energy is calm here in a way it wasn't at the beginning of this session. Like something tense has finally released. Like a conversation that has been building for years is exhaling into the present moment. What I want to leave you with is this: you have been perceiving something real. Your intuition about this connection, about this person, about the depth of what's been unspoken between you, your instincts were tracking truth even when the surface gave you nothing to hold on to. That kind of perception is worth trusting. Not blindly. Not in a way that bypasses your own well-being. But as a guide. And for what's coming, because something is coming, the energy here is clear about movement forward. Try to receive it without needing it to be perfect. The most honest things rarely arrive without trembling a little. When someone who has spent years behind emotional walls finally steps out of them, they're going to be a little unsteady. That's not weakness. That's what courage actually looks like up close. Whatever has been kept inside, whatever has lived in silence while both of you navigated around it, it's ready now. And so, I think, after everything you've been through in this waiting, are you? Trust the shift you've been sensing. Trust the quiet that's been changing its quality lately. Something is coming through. Something true. And you deserve nothing less than that.